All right, so we're being asked to solve these limit problems, assuming that the limit of the function, let me just change this. Okay, yeah, some fun colors. So assuming that the limit of f of x as x approaches 6 is 4, compute these other limits, right? So to do this, we're going to use two of the basic limit laws um, of the five, and I encourage you to really learn those rules because they're very useful, and then practice applying those rules to the questions that in the book, and then eventually it'll be rather second nature for you to look at a problem and say, oh, okay, I can apply this, I can apply that, right? It has to be sort of practiced, okay? All right, because it'll take too long for you to sit there and trying to figure out, okay, what law should I use? It should be immediately obvious when you look at a question, right? So so in this case, for example, if you look at these questions, you could say, okay, it's immediately obvious that, okay, well, I have a power law for this A, and then I have the quotient law. I probably need the quotient law for B, and then again the power law for C, right? So let's just solve these real quick. Okay, so for part A, right? So the limit of as x approaches 6 of f of x squared equals the limit of f of x as x approaches 6, that whole thing squared, okay? And that is equal to, so we are given the limit of this inner part, we're given that to be 4, so that's just going to be 4 squared, which is 16. Okay, great. So let's look at part B. Okay, so we asked the limit as x approaches 6 of 1 over f of x, and we know that from the quotient law this is just the limit as x approaches 6 of 1 divided by 4, right? Because we have the, well, let me just write it out. Limit as x approaches 6 of f of x, which is 4. So we just have 1 over 4. Okay. And for part C, see if I can fit this in here. No, never mind. For part C, we're asked the limit as x approaches 6 for x x times the square root, the square root of f of x, right? And this is equal to the limit as x, limit of x as x approaches 6, right, times the square root of the limit as x approaches 6 of f of x. Okay, now this is actually using the product rule as well, which I should have written down earlier, but I didn't. So if you have two functions, so this is simply saying, okay, so let's just pretend that this x is, this function x is g of x, right? So g of x equals x. So what we actually have here is the limit as x approaches 6 of some function g of x times the square root of f of x, okay? And from the product law, we know, so the product law is this. Let's just write it down. The third one, product law, that says the limit as x approaches c of f of x, g of x is equal to the limit as x approaches c of f of x, so the product of the limits, right? Which is what we're doing here, right? So so just imagine that x in this question is another function, let's say g of x, and so we can rewrite this question as this, right? And then we simply use the product rule to rewrite the question, right? And the limit of x as x approaches 6 is just 6, right? So this is just going to be 6 times the square root of this limit, which we are given up here as 4, right? So times the square root of 4, which is 6 times 2, which is 12. Okay, so I hope that was clear what happened in this last question, right? Because we had to actually use the product law as well. We simply we recognized that this is just a product of two functions, where x is just some function g of x, where I say g of x equals x. So we can recast it like this, and then use the product law, and then followed by the power law that says the limit of a square root of a function is the square root of the limit, right? And then we got the answer. Okay.